Hey, it's Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it's my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes that I can deduce various lessons that I've learned along the way, as well as highlight the various things that I talk about and teach and how I'm applying it in my own life. So, this past week was an interesting one in a number of really good ways. But the theme seems to be like there's a lot of good things all coming together, but they're all happening at the same time. And that's kind of, you don't necessarily get to pick when that happens. You're obviously not going to complain. It's a very high class problem to be having things being greenlit that you've been working on for a long time. You just wish that it wasn't all at the same time because now all of a sudden your workload like triples and so forth. But a very exciting time. So my friend Khalil, who I work on various projects with, he pitched a show to a company. It got picked up. In fact, he pitched two shows and they got picked up. And we shot one of the series this past Friday. We shot 10 episodes and it was very funny. Like, it's a very comedic show. It's a very smart show, and it was a great time overall. And so I'm very proud of him. I'm proud of us for filming it. I'm excited to see it out there, and I'll kind of mention what it is once I can and so forth. But yeah, very exciting. Now, the only thing is, we have to rush these episodes out there. Like, our turnaround time is extremely quick. He's the one primarily working on this. I might need to step in for a couple of the things, but overall, very exciting. Now, this is all in conjunction with me trying to finish and meet a March 2nd deadline for our feature film. In terms of that, this weekend, we got very close to picture lock. Picture lock, for those of you unaware, is when you don't change any of the visuals as far as timing. You might be working on visual effects and graphics and things like that, but the timing doesn't shift. So that way you can get to sound design, music, and so forth, because now the timing of everything is there. And that was exciting. We pulled out a lot of stops. Kudos to John Comerford and Courtney Stewart. They came over, they came with notes, and they were very specific. It was a lot of nitpicks, some might say, but it actually enhanced performances, sped up certain things, and it's a lot of things that as an audience member, if you watch, and people have, a feeling about, they can't quite express it. Well, this was us being able to express it and fix it before, obviously putting it out there to the world and them having that feeling. So hopefully this counterbalances or fixes those things that people might have been like, ooh, that's weird, or that doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? Now, is it going to be 100% foolproof? Obviously, no movie ultimately is. Some certain things are a little bit confusing for some people versus others. So you never know how an audience is going to interpret it, but you always want to put your best foot forward, and that's what we were able to do. And in fact, last week I put out an episode about cutting more story than you're comfortable with. It's the notion of kill your darlings type of thing. And we actually, that's essentially what we were doing. And some of the things we found out that we wanted to keep, but I would say like 90% of it we cut out of the movie, and it made it really stronger. It made it flow better. It made certain narratives a lot more digestible and whatnot. So it was really good. Now, the only downside for me personally, and I know that's a big thing, but it takes the movie to it cuts the running time down to an hour and 20 minutes, which I wanted like an hour and 22, 23. I don't know. That was the goal in my mind of like, this would constitute as a full feature film. And for some reason, I know it's like not really a big thing. And certainly an hour and 20 minute movie is still a feature film. I mean, if you look at like The Little Mermaid and, those types of movies, Nightmare Before Christmas, I think is only like 70 minutes. So, it still constitutes as a feature film. There's plenty of amazing movies that are that length, that are classics, but I don't know. So it's just my own little gripe about it. But that was me, in terms of cutting the stuff out. it was me practicing what I preach. And ultimately, like, as much as I would love to have just a little bit lengthier movie, I'm not going to do that simply for the length of running time versus the story, because the story is ultimately better. And, you know, a couple of things did get cut that I liked in terms of scenes, and, you know, some of them were also like they showcased different production design and so forth, but again, it didn't serve the story ultimately. The actors didn't do a bad job in those moments. It just had to go. Now, there were a couple of things that, from a character perspective, we also, like, sometimes a scene would be happening and a character would say something in the middle, and then the scene would kind of continue in and on something else. Well, we actually switched it to help the performances of not only the actors, but also by having, story-wise, having that sort of dialogue at the end, was a lot more hard-hitting than having it get lost in the middle. So we were able to do a couple of those things as well, which is really cool. And yeah, it's been a fun and interesting process. Now we get to the phase of sound design and music and so forth. I've been kind of lining up these various things as I go along, so people are anticipating them, and I owe, various people notes about, like my friend Cody Schramm, he's done some music for it, and I've been promising the poor kid that I'd have notes for him or try it out, and it's just one of those things, like, I'd rather have the completed story and then focus on that. But he's been doing a wonderful job, and I think I've talked about him before. He's someone I've worked with since college, and just amazing guy, very creative, love him to death. And so, when you find somebody like that, and I feel like this of a lot of people in my life, like John Comerford is one of these people, like everyone that essentially is working on this movie, like I want to work with them again. And as long as they want to work with me, I will continue working with them. And I feel like a lot of people don't tap into, when they feel like there's a lack of resources, well, they don't tap into their friends, because they are resources. Now, I'm not saying that from a narcissistic standpoint. You still have to, provide value to them. It's not just about you taking. All these people, I hope, and, if they're watching, I'm telling you now, you call on me and I'll do whatever I can for you. And I certainly have. And I continue to try to prove that every time that they do something for me. So keep that in mind as you go forward. The other kind of thing, for some reason, that I'm seeing and I'm observing is a lot of companies and how they're handling employees and so forth. And maybe my mind's just more attuned to this because I've been listening and reading Simon Sinek for more extensively now. And he's someone that talks about kind of a next wave of culture, about, capitalism being capitalism only working when we actually care about individuals and the employees, because, by doing that, it'll actually make a company more successful and so forth. So this is kind of line of thinking. And I'm just seeing a lot of companies go about it in the completely wrong way, where last minute they're firing people for budget cuts, and budgets they're like an easy way to just to see a result, right? It's a lot harder to change a company's culture and get to where you want to be versus being like, oh, well, we cut X, Y, and Z, and so we're on track financially. So that's number one. Also, I'm just kind of baffled by some of these companies, having the foresight, to... One of the reasons why, like, firing people sort of day of or like last minute with no real heads up is annoying, because that means, like, you had no foresight. It's like you woke up one day and you're like, oh, we're doing terribly financially, we got to fix this right away. It's like, no, you got to that place over an extended period of time. And generally it's decisions made by management that got you to this place, and you're not admitting those. Now you're putting it on the employees. And, again, not that this is necessarily every company, but just in seeing this around me and knowing some of this stuff, that in my sort of circle of the people that I know, and just kind of being in the entertainment space, the things that I see is they're not the people's fault, and they're not I don't know, they're just not being treated in the best way. And it's one of those things like people say, well, it's just kind of standard business practice. Well, it doesn't have to be your standard way of operating. And that's what kind of irks me, like, all these people that say like, oh, I want to be good to my employees and this and that, but that's standard business practice. It's like, again, it doesn't have to be yours. And that's where you have to have the real conviction to kind of be a true leader, if you walk the walk, so to speak, because so many people say we're the best, we're this, and again, going back to Simon Sinek, these are like, for me, trigger words, not in the sense that I get angry, but in the sense like, I'm like, oh, you don't know, you're not an actual good leader, you're fucking bullshit. Because there is no best, based on who's standard. The goal of any company is to continue being in business. So there is no like being the best or an end game. It's just continuing, right? And as he says, you need a just cause in order to kind of get everyone on board. And a lot of companies, they don't necessarily have that and so forth. So I don't know. I'm just been studying business for a little bit more concentrated in the past like year and a half, 2 years. And, these are some of the takeaways. And, the other kind of thing of it being is that I feel like too many people pride themselves on the process or the brand or so forth versus, again, just their employees generally. And when and in sort of the world that I'm in, the employees are generally talent or producers and so forth. And, especially if they're talent, too many people I see like, oh, well, we could just replace them. Everyone's replaceable. And it's like, yeah, everyone's replaceable. But you also need to go about it the right way to handle that, because especially if it's front facing and there's an audience there, they're going to be a little bit irked over how things happened. It's just very interesting watching this. Like, you can go back to when Defy shut down at this point, a year and change ago, like just over a year pretty much. Fans took that. Well, fans reacted to that in a big way. They were affected. The shows that they loved were affected. Collider has been going through this, and there's other companies that I can't name that are going through similar situations. And I'm curious to see how it all unfolds. And it's just one of those things. Like, I wish people had a little bit more hubris and humility in this type of situation to just say, like, this is what we're going through, and rather than like, this is what we need to do. I don't know. It's just, I think there's I get it. For a lot of these people, like, their tail's in between their legs and they got to figure out a solution. But coming about solutions from a place of fear is definitely not going to solve that. And, finances are a problem and a struggle for every content creator. So just because, like, you're a big company doesn't mean that you don't have those problems. So those are kind of things I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to reflect back on my week. Like, it's a lot of little things that add up to a lot, in the sense that, it's not like if I laid it all out, it was all that exciting in terms of, for me, but it was just, continuing to work on the movie, continuing to work on my book, continuing my job, working with my friend Khalil on, his stuff and whatever else. And then, a couple of my friends, they're always calling me for advice and so forth, and I'm always happy to give it. So, that's kind of in a nutshell my week. When you say it like that, it doesn't sound very glamorous, but in the end, it kind of adds up to a lot. For some reason, right now, like, people are viewing this time as like a very negative and bad one. One, because of, people have been hit by the Kobe death very hard, and that might just be because I live in LA, so I'm much more attuned to it than perhaps like other places might be affected. But there's also other stuff, and so I don't know. I feel like people think like January was a tough month and 2020 is like a tough year, and I get it, but the more I read, I just kind of keep reminding myself, like, the world's not out to necessarily get you. It's just what happens in life. There's going to be ups and downs. And it goes back to Stoic principles of, this is kind of the way it is, and you don't really control what happens in life, but you control how you react to it. And one of the other interesting things is I made a choice in as part of my New Year's resolution to really humble myself and get down to just doing the work. That includes like putting out content every single day at scale, and and that's on top of all this other stuff. And so unless something really drastic were to happen, like I'm committing to this no matter what. And one of the things that I see is that I feel like various people that I know get to a certain place and they feel like they don't have to do some of the stuff that got them there. Now, there's always going to be a shift. Not everything that you used to do is going to benefit you at a certain point. But certainly your work ethic is something that should remain constant. The how of how you work might change, but the work ethic should remain the same. And when I talk about kind of companies and what I'm seeing, there's people that I know that I think got a little too complacent because they found success and so forth, and now all of a sudden they're in trouble. But it's because they weren't willing to work hard anymore. They thought they made it and they could coast. It's kind of interesting, like Bar Rescue, which is Don Taffer's show over on Paramount Network. One of the things, there's been plenty of examples of bars that he's rescued that were successful, but then the owner, after a couple of years, he starts taking a back seat, letting other people lead, and then things go downhill. And I think that happens more often than we'd like to admit. And so that's something that I'm trying to keep top of mind for me, to not get complacent with certain things. Now, interestingly enough, I was having a conversation with two of my friends at this point, maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, I think. And one of my friends was like, well, I just feel like, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And, what should I be doing next? What should I be doing next? And I kind of turned to one of my other friends and said, let me know if you disagree. But I think the key here is to continue to do what you're doing. But the problem that I'm hearing in your voice is that it sounds like right now you feel like you should be doing other things and you're starting to like half-ass this. You need to continue with that same vigorousness moving forward with the things that you're doing, and not looking for the next thing. If it comes, it comes. But like right now you've got X, Y, and Z. Like, you're good. You just got to continue, pounding the stone over and over, and sometimes like more of the same is not a bad thing. So, and so like that's why I do get weary of words like what's next. It's like, because to me it just sounds like you're getting bored of a certain thing. So these are just kind of a couple of the observations that I've seen that I'm thinking about. I don't know. I know it's these vlogs of mine tend to get kind of a little bit philosophical, maybe esoteric. Sometimes I don't even come to a conclusion on some of these things, but I want you guys to know how I process certain information and what's on top of my mind. And these are the things that are top of my mind, kind of going forward. Also, kind of one of the other things that I'll share, one of my friends, he was telling me like, he's only got 3 more years in order to make it. I'm like, by whose definition? He's like, well, I'm getting older and people want you, what's young, blah, blah, blah. And I said, hey, those are very limiting beliefs. You don't know that for a fact. And, there's plenty of older hosts out there that are still quite successful. And okay, so let's just say that, that you're not for the young crowd. Well, guess what? Like, people are getting older and they're living longer. So like, I told him, like, don't you think that if your core audience was like 50 plus or even 70 plus, that wouldn't be a lot of audience? And, people just need to redefine success for themselves. And I think, I don't know, we, especially as Americans, have a very skewed idea of what success is. And I no longer look at that. I look at, what makes me ultimately happy. And sure, you can't be happy every single day. But I think that we just put too much pressure on ourselves, and, based on the notion of money and finances, people can be very successful. But I also know a lot of people that are unhappy that have millions, if not billions. Jim Carrey, he has a very good quote that he says, I wish everyone could be a millionaire for a day so they could realize that this is not the key to happiness. So just something to think about, and whatever else. So, and the other kind of thing being of it, last week I posted a lot about negative visualization, which is kind of a process for taking your negative thoughts, and instead of letting them control your life, really kind of taking ownership over it. And if you're worried about well, what if I lose my job? Okay, well, consider that. What are the true ramifications of if you lost your job? And really go through it. And so, because part of the problem is our brain then, without giving it an answer, our brain defaults to the world's going to end. And, even in that line of thinking, I always like to say, okay, so if you lose your job, the world's going to end. Well, what's it matter if you lose your job, because the world's going to end and then you're dead, so it doesn't matter. So I like to laugh off the kind of absurd notions right off the bat, but okay. I understand this is a very hard thing, but okay, so you can't pay your bills. Well, okay. So now, instead of worrying about that, you can't pay your bills, what are ways you could pay your bills? That might be downsizing, tapping into your savings, taking a job that, as an intermediary, that you might need to do in order to pay your bills, right? I think a lot of people spend too much time in worry instead of doing something, and Gary Vee talks about this a lot. It's what other option you got? And it sounds very cynical to some people and very harsh, but it's yeah, what other option you got? We all got to find a way to survive ultimately. And, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and get to it, no matter what situation you're in. But negative visualization can help refocus that energy, and instead of worrying about something, it can start to create solutions. So I'll leave you with that. Hopefully you got various takeaway from this. Please let me know what you did, because I'd be curious to know. Also, if there's any questions that you have or any lessons that you'd like me to teach moving forward, by all means, I am happy to do so. Just leave a comment or hit me up on social media at Svitek. Truly appreciate you checking in with me, seeing what my journey's all about, and I hope to see you next time.